This epic trench battle from 1917 was shot to look like one long take, and it was a huge challenge for both the cast and crew. It involved multiple cranes, speeding trucks, and perfectly timed handoffs. But this is just one example of a one-take scene, or a oneer, that pushed filmmakers to their limits and required impressive technical innovations. Here's how 8 movie and TV scenes were shot to look like one long take. One-take scenes are naturally suited for intense action, as you can see in this fight scene in Atomic Blonde. Despite shooting in a real building, the crew still had to alter the set to accommodate the oneer. For example, they built this elevator, which helped create a natural stitch point, a way to hide the moment the camera cuts and keep the continuous illusion going. They also use another stitching technique called body crossing, in which a cut is hidden when a performer blocks the camera, as seen here with this henchman. Because the fight was shot to look like one take, it needed to be shot in chronological order. So the effects team had to constantly apply new makeup to Charlize Theron and the other characters as the fighting continued and injuries increased. Charlize did her own stunts for a large part of this sequence. However, for some of the riskier moves, the crew subbed in her stunt double, Monique Ganderton. For example, the director used motion blur when Charlize had to fall down the stairs and slam into a wall. That's actually Monique tumbling down the stairs before switching back to Charlize hitting the wall. Unlike Atomic Blonde, Netflix's Extraction hops from location to location, as opposed to just one building. The entire sequence goes on for about 12 minutes and consists of approximately 36 segments cobbled together. The non-stop action required director Sam Hargrave to do some stunts of his own. For this car chase, he strapped himself to the hood of another vehicle, and then had to quickly unstrap himself and place the camera inside the other car. He then had to replicate the same shot backwards by leaning out the car once he was inside. This helped create a natural transition point. If Sam's position was off even slightly, they'd have to shoot it all over again. Then for this shot where Chris Hemsworth's stunt double tumbles off an awning, Sam roped himself into a pulley system to get up close to the action. The sequence also fools the eye in many other ways. For instance, when Ovi runs through this doorway, he is actually running into a room in a different building 10 blocks away. The crew had to change locations to one where there was more space to pull off the upcoming action. And like with Atomic Blonde, they frequently swapped out Chris with his stunt double, Bobby Holland Hanton. The first shot you see here is Chris's face. They could then pan to his double without anyone noticing by shooting the back of his head. For the Day of the Dead parade scene in Spectre, cinematographer Hoyte van Hoytema wanted to start big and then go small and intimate. That meant starting wide with parade shots, then getting in closer to the marchers before following Bond into a hotel room. To pull this off, Hoyte used a techno crane. The crane started high and then lowered down into the crowd without cutting. A Steadicam operator then jumped off, pushed farther into the crowd, and followed actor Daniel Craig up to the hotel room. While the street scenes were shot in Mexico, the hotel room was actually set in the UK. The crowd scenes featured 1,500 extras. According to ILM VFX supervisor Mark Bukowski, since they couldn't get a perfect shot where every extra looked the right way at the right time, the VFX team inserted digital masks over their faces. Sometimes, oneers are limited by the space they're shot in, which means the crew needs to be a bit more creative. In the Season 2 premiere of The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, cinematographer M. David Mullen had to lead the camera through a fictional department store, through a mail slot, and then into the small room where Midge Maisel works as a switchboard operator. Unlike other continuous shots, there were no wide spaces for the camera to pass through, just 5 feet of space between these 2 rows of actresses. For both camera person and performer, it was about precise timing. The space was so tight that the actresses had to lean back so they wouldn't get hit by the camera. Then, when the camera went through the center of the room, actresses wheeled around in their chairs so they wouldn't block the shot. For for Birdman, it wasn't just one scene, but the entire movie that needed to look like one long take. According to director Alejandro González Iñárritu, some of the takes were up to 20 minutes long. Because of the amount of movement in the film, Birdman was shot using small handheld cameras and Steadicams. These allowed the crew to more easily follow the cast as they walked through New York's crowded streets. This also meant the crew couldn't use typical large light kits. So, according to cinematographer Emmanuel Lubezki, they instead relied on natural and practical lights in the scene, like these colorful light bulbs above Michael Keaton and even the lights emitting from Times Square. Birdman wasn't just a challenge for the crew, it was also a huge endeavor for the cast. According to Emma Stone, if she flubbed even a single word, she'd have to start again from the very top. Like Birdman, 1917 was also filmed to look like one single take over its entire 2-hour running time. But it was even more complicated due to its epic battle sequences. Pulling this film off involved the most careful planning imaginable. Every set was precisely measured out and could be no longer than the length the camera could travel. Since the crew was constantly on foot, they relied almost entirely on natural light. Look at the scene where Schofield runs through a destroyed city. It was lit up by flares in the sky. Because the flares were the main light for part of the scene, the crew needed to time exactly how long the flares needed to be in the air. They figured this out in pre-production, where they ran a light above a mini model of the set to see where exactly all the shadows would fall. Of course, the film also relied on stitch points, like here when Blake and Schofield walk through a black curtain. But most of its magic was accomplished using innovations in technology. For example, Schofield's journey downriver was captured by a drone. Meanwhile, lighter and smaller cameras allowed the crew to move through trenches and difficult terrain with ease. Then, to get across no man's land, cinematographer Roger Deakins and the crew attached cameras to a cable system above the set. This shot where Schofield runs through a destroyed city and jumps off a ledge and into a river was too dangerous to do in real life. So the part of him running was shot on set, while the jump was actually shot using CGI with a swap background that allowed for a seamless transition. Shooting continuous takes means it's hard to call cut, so it's not ideal for making mistakes. But this moment here, where actor George Mackay runs alongside the trench and then trips, was not intentional, but in the end it felt natural, so it stayed in the movie. The entire set for this episode of The Haunting of Hill House had to be built specifically to accommodate a single shot. Take a look at this elevator. It was designed to lower the camera person down to the next floor and allow them to capture the shot of Olivia and Hugh running down the stairs without a break. Because the camera goes between Hill House and the funeral home in the episode, the two stages were actually built adjacent to each other and connected by a hallway. This allowed the camera to follow Hugh as he walked directly from the funeral home into the house. Oneers are frantic by nature, and they involve a lot of movement and setup changes. The Hill House set had places throughout for the crew and their equipment to hide whenever the camera turned in their direction. Like with Birdman and 1917, Hill House also demonstrated the challenges of lighting a oneer. If an actor missed a cue, they wouldn't be lit properly. So series creator Mike Flanagan came up with a unique solution. When he clapped these two wood blocks together, the cast member knew what to do. One-take scenes aren't just used to show movement from place to place. They can also be really useful in showing the passage of time. This scene from the Showtime series Kidding shows the character Shayna watching Mr. Pickle's puppet time on her TV as her life progresses and improves around her. The shot captures 5 years of her life over the course of 1 minute and 42 seconds. Because the camera had to circle constantly around the room as it changed, this endeavor was an absolute mad rush for the cast and crew.
Couch!
To show the passage of time, the camera operator circled around the room. Each area of the room would show a new development in Shayna's life. So whenever the camera wasn't focused on them, the 50 crew members had to swap out furniture and bring in new props. Then this wall slid over into the kitchen. While that was happening, actress Riki Lindholm had to go through multiple costume changes, some of which involved using a body double. What are some of your favorite one-take scenes? Let us know in the comments.